Routines govern a massive portion of our existence. The things we do on autopilot essentially dictate the trajectory of our lives. In fact, foundational research from institutions like Duke University indicates that upwards of 40 to 45%, and depending on the environment, sometimes significantly more, of our daily waking actions are driven entirely by unconscious routines. Human beings are incredibly complex, and struggling to automate one specific behavior absolutely does not imply that you're incapable of automating others with ease. We have all heard the cultural myth that it takes exactly 21 days to wire a new routine. Some experts confidently claim 18, others swear by a month, and some even propose a 60-day window. What is the actual time frame? Is the duration dictated by the complexity of the action itself, or by the unique neurological makeup of the person attempting it? We can look directly at a landmark 2010 study led by researcher Philippa Lally. Her team discovered that the window for coding a completely new automatic behavior is astonishingly wide, spanning anywhere from a mere 18 days to a staggering 254 days, depending entirely on the individual in question. My objective today is to take the established science of neuroplasticity, how our nervous system physically reshapes itself through learning, and leverage it for creating, sustaining, and if you choose to do so, dismantling specific routines. I want to equip you with a highly practical mechanism extracted directly from research psychology. Every time you repeat an action, microscopic structural shifts occur within the neural pathways that govern procedural memory. I want to pause briefly to clarify what procedural memory actually entails. Within the neuroscience of memory, we draw a hard line between episodic memory and procedural memory. Episodic memory acts as your biographical diary, recalling a specific series of past events. Procedural memory is the brain's blueprint for executing a specific sequence of actions to achieve a distinct physical outcome. Imagine it as a baker's recipe, a strict laboratory protocol, or, in the context of physical training, the exact weightlifting routine you plan to execute, the specific trail you intend to hike, or the precise strokes required to swim your daily laps. It is abundantly clear that for anyone attempting to integrate a new routine, deliberately shifting into this procedural memory framework is an incredibly effective strategy for bypassing that initial psychological resistance, which we often refer to as limbic friction. How exactly do you activate this state? Through a remarkably straightforward mental walkthrough. And it absolutely does not require you to keep your eyes closed. Frequently, when people hear the phrase visualization exercise, they picture someone sitting cross-legged on a yoga mat, meditating intensely to manifest an outcome. But it does not need to involve any of that. It is merely the act of consciously mapping out the exact granular steps required to physically perform your target routine. I will use a basic scenario, but this principle scales to any ambition. Suppose I want to start brewing a pot of loose leaf green tea for myself every morning. I would intentionally visualize the entire sequence, walking into the pantry, filling the electric kettle with water, measuring the exact amount of tea leaves, and pouring the boiling water, mentally navigating every single step from initiation to completion. It turns out that executing this mundane mental walkthrough just one single time drastically elevates the probability that a person will actually follow through with the behavior, not merely on day one, but consistently over the subsequent weeks and months. That is a profound neurological leverage point, and the scientific backing for it is incredibly solid. Let us pivot to a second mechanism, which I consider to be perhaps the absolute pinnacle tool for anchoring and maintaining new routines. The concept I'm referring to is scientifically known as task bracketing. The neural architecture facilitating task bracketing is precisely what enables us to adopt a fresh habit or shatter an unwanted one. Deep within the brain, we possess a cluster of structures collectively known as the basal ganglia. These regions are the primary command centers for action initiation, pulling the trigger on a behavior, and action inhibition, holding back from a behavior. In clinical literature, these are often classified as go pathways and no-go pathways. Many individuals naturally lean toward one extreme. They might excel at launching into action, but struggle to resist impulsive urges. Others possess incredibly strong inhibitory control and constraint, but find it immensely difficult to generate forward momentum. A flawless equilibrium between the two is exceptionally rare, and I frankly never encountered someone who possesses it perfectly. Task bracketing relies on a specialized subdivision of these circuits within the basal ganglia. We have dedicated neural loops designed to essentially bookend a behavior, tagging the moments immediately preceding and directly following the routine. It functions as a neurological wrapper for the activity, marking the habit's time frame, but entirely separate from the execution of the habit itself. This distinction is absolutely critical because task bracketing dictates whether a routine will remain resilient against external chaos. It determines whether a behavior remains locked in, regardless of whether you suffered from terrible insomnia the night before, feel completely unfocused, lack all emotional motivation, or are drowning in a highly stressful workday. When these bracketing circuits are profoundly entrenched around a specific action, you are guaranteed to hit the gym for that weightlifting session unconditionally. You will undoubtedly take a shower unconditionally. Personal hygiene is a stellar reference point here. Unless someone is battling severe clinical depression, even if their world is falling apart and they barely slept, if they are preparing for the day, they will almost inevitably go through the motions of showering or washing their face in the morning. I would certainly hope so, at least. However, that automaticity rarely applies to activities you secretly view as optional. Whether it is physical training, adhering to a nutritional plan, or dedicating time to deep work, you are the ultimate judge assigning the label of essential or negotiable. Task bracketing effectively burns a neurological signature into your cortex, a biological stamp declaring this sequence must initiate at this exact juncture, turning it into a pure reflex. While dissecting the granular steps of a behavior, that procedural blueprinting we just covered, is undeniably helpful, you can intentionally calibrate your nervous system to capitalize on this bracketing mechanism. You can prime your neurology to crave the execution of the habit. Think of it as a neurological warm-up routine for your brain. When a specific region called the dorsolateral striatum is activated, your entire system is preloaded for action, eagerly waiting for you to consciously select the routine you wish to deploy. If your goal is to install a new behavior or dismantle an old one, it pays immense dividends to focus not just on the action itself, but heavily on the buffer zones flanking it. You want to artificially manufacture a spotlight of dopamine associated with the entire temporal envelope surrounding the habit. What does this look like in practical application? I will provide another concrete example, but again, this translates to any domain. Assume I'm struggling to complete a mandatory 45-minute daily writing block in the early afternoon. My strategy should be to manufacture positive anticipation for the moments just before opening my laptop and the moments right after closing it. I need to embrace the upcoming cognitive strain, dive into the deep work, and actively anticipate the sense of accomplishment at the end. It means acknowledging the initial friction, but deliberately dispensing internal rewards for the complete transitional arc. You are essentially praising the bracket in addition to rewarding the effort in between. This brings us to the specific protocol for dismantling negative routines. Instead of obsessing over the triggers that cause the unwanted action, you should exploit the fact that the neural pathways driving that bad habit are currently firing and forcefully insert a substitute behavior in the immediate aftermath. This paradigm is profoundly interesting and incredibly potent. Traditionally, I would have assumed that replacing a habit requires substituting the exact same craving or developing flawless self-awareness of the emotional state preceding the failure. In reality, the narrow window directly following the negative action is a golden opportunity to inject an adaptive, constructive behavior. Literally any behavior that fundamentally contradicts the nature of the bad habit. Let us illustrate this clearly. Imagine you are attempting to study, but you impulsively open a social media app on your phone, instantly flooding yourself with regret for getting distracted. The standard advice is to simply lock the screen and force yourself back to studying. But if you possess that level of willpower, you wouldn't be struggling with the distraction in the first place. The scientifically superior approach is to immediately pivot into an entirely different positive routine. This achieves two massive neuroplastic victories. First, you tether the execution of the negative impulse directly to this positive action in time. By doing so, you force the activation of competing neural pathways, which gradually degrades and scrambles the original firing sequence of the bad habit. You're essentially forging a chimeric, two-part routine. A negative initiation immediately hijacked by a positive conclusion. This generates a severe temporal dissonance in the brain, making you hyper-aware of the negative impulse the next time it arises. Let me make this highly actionable for you. Suppose your automatic reflex is constantly checking your email during deep work. You catch yourself doing it and think, I slipped up again. Here's the protocol. You would immediately close the tab, and you would rapidly transition into a pre-selected positive action. Because this relies on personal values, my examples won't fit everyone perfectly. But perhaps your secondary goal is improving your posture, so you immediately execute 2 minutes of stretching. Perhaps you want to be more mindful, so you do a quick round of box breathing. Maybe you want to improve your grip strength, so you grab a set of hand grippers for 60 seconds. You must abruptly terminate whatever you're doing and execute that alternative, beneficial habit in the immediate wake of the failure, even if it is just for a very brief duration.